Hello everybody, we're back with another Frequently Asked Questions Friday. So thank you ever so much for this week's amazing questions. Don't forget, if you have questions you want to ask, go below. Leave them in the comments. We scan the comments and we choose the questions from the comments. And of course, if there's stuff that you want to add to the discussion we're having here, please do. I love scanning through and answering questions wherever I can and getting involved in some of the amazing discussions that you have. Please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. And of course, you can go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free goodies. Okay, let's get stuck in. Do you use normalization? And in which case and cases would you use normalization? The times that I've reached for it, in the thousands and thousands of sessions I've worked on in DAWs, I've rarely used it. But when I have used it, sometimes I get stuff that's done purely digitally. So somebody's using virtual instruments and they've printed them, or they're doing stuff that's totally digital. So there's not really a signal to noise ratio issue. Why am I bringing this up? Well, because the signal is almost invisible. I've had sessions I've opened up and I'm like looking at it and it looks like I'm looking at a blank set of files. And then I'll click on the waveform view and it will go from this to this to this to this to this. And suddenly, oh, there it is. There's some waveforms. That's when I might reach for normalization, because I can just highlight the whole track, normalize it, and then it will bring it up significantly so I can actually use it. But look, the reality is all it's doing is like taking the peaks and making sure they don't distort and then just turning everything up the same amount. So it's not really doing anything. This is an interesting one. It's a little bit like with Warren Sokol talking about LUFS and how there's a massive misconception with that, because LUFS, for instance, takes the average of the whole track. Okay, the average volume of the whole track. The problem with that is if the first 90% of your track is an acoustic guitar and vocal, and then the last 10 seconds of it, 10% of it, is like massive, like heavy drums and whatever, it's going to take the average, the 90 and the 10. So what will happen is the whole end of it could potentially go into clip. Same thing with normalization. It won't cause clipping, but if you have an incredibly dynamic source, it will take those massive peaks, bring them up to a level that's, as loud as you can get necessarily. You can set obviously how loud you want to be with the normalization tool, but as standard, it will get up to just about as loud as it can go before peaking. But then the other 90% of it might be tiny little signals. So normalizing it's okay. I'd gain the track up first. I'd gain it up to a level where I wanted to use it. And then I'd probably peak control it using compression. So I rarely use it. And the cases that I have used it are, yes, exactly, to take waveforms that I'm barely hearing or seeing and get them to a level where I can actually either mix through a console or stick a plug-in on or something so they're audible and I can actually know that there's waveforms there. It's pretty much the only times I've used it. It's a handful of times. When you're mixing hybrid through your desk, what medium are you recording the stereo output to? Back into Pro Tools or some other digital device? I go back into Pro Tools. I predominantly use my Lavery Blue and I go back into a pair of channels through the Lavery Blue. I also, of course, have the QES Pad 2, which I know and love as well. Very different sounding, both absolutely fantastic. I've had Apogees, I've had Avid IOs, you name it, I've recorded through them back into a pair of channels. That's going through the console, coming out the stereo output, back through a really nice I/O. Now, there are many different ones on the market, like really, really high quality ones. I highly suggest that you find ones that suit you. But I will say on the subject, a lot of my friends for years used to bounce to the Alesis Master Link. really, really well-known mixers would bounce to the Alesis Masterlink. Others before that used to go to DAT tapes back in the 90s and early 2000s. And of course, there's still many, many, many people that bounce to either quarter-inch or half-inch tape. I think a lot of mixers that I admire will do multiple. They'll go back into Pro Tools and print to tape. And then when it comes to mastering, they'll choose what they want. I think the reality is like, what is your ultimate goal? If you want this to feel analog, then of course tape, like an Ampex machine or something, is going to give you an amazing result. Otari, there's a lot of affordable ones. Revox, all of those are great ways of going. I would always print a safety digital copy as well, just in case the tape stock has issues or whatever. Or at least when you're mastering, you have the choice. But I personally print back into Pro Tools through either the QES or the Lavry Blue. Would you consider cutting program parts to match what a human is playing and bring a little more human element into those program parts? Yes, I mean, a lot. Like drum loops and match them against drums. But what was interesting, if you watch the Foo Fighters My Hero breakdown that we did with Bradley Cook, if you haven't seen that, definitely check it out. Those are two live drum kits that Dave Grohl's playing. One is in the cement room in Grandmaster, and the other one is in the warehouse, which was basically the parking lot as you went into Grandmaster Studios from the back. And when you solo them, you hear a little bit of flanning. In the track, they're absolutely phenomenal. So it sort of depends how you look at it. You could take a loop programmed part and have a drummer groove to it, and then maybe adjust the program part here and there where it isn't feeling quite so good with the live drums. That might be the way to go. And then occasionally correct maybe an errant kick or two or whatever on the live drums. Otherwise, if you sit there and literally sample accurately, edit the drums and the program drums, you'll end up with stuff that sounds almost smaller rather than bigger. You want big, powerful, low end. Yes, you get all the phase right, you might get it, but you're going to shorten all of the sustain. Things aren't going to blur together, for instance. They're not going to sound wrong in the right kind of way. So yes, I have definitely edited program parts to match drum feel and performance feel, but at the same time, I love it when a musician pushes and pulls against something that's more static. I mean, after all, isn't that a click track? Isn't that what was great about real musicians that played to click tracks? They would sit there and push against it and use it as a way of knowing how to lay back and how to push forward. So kind of a combo platter. I think having your musicians play to a drum part, a drum loop, a sequence loop is really, really cool. And then when it doesn't feel right in the sequence part, then maybe edit it around. But I'm not sure if I would go in there and match loop to drum kit, kick and snare, sample accurate, because then I think it would lose that little bit of tension that makes music sound great. That tension of those things pushing and pulling. But each song deserves its own thing, and put the love into it and try all kinds of different ideas, and you'll learn something new. I hope you're enjoying the answers to these questions. Please leave a bunch of comments and questions below that we can scour through for, the next Fact Friday. And of course, hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to check out Produce Like a Pro, because you can get a whole bunch of free goodies. What is a good interface for someone just starting to record on a budget? Are cheaper interfaces worth the money, or should I save up and get a more expensive one? I'm on the fence as to what kind of price point, because for me, depends. When you say interface, everybody agrees that the chips that are inside all of these interfaces are the same. It's the circuitry around it. So when you pay more money, generally what you're paying for is better component value, better circuitry, maybe going right up to something like a Burl, you've got transformers in there that's going to add a sound. And then you get right down at the entry level, you can get IOs at interfaces at $50. I think the answer is this. Do you have no other way of recording instruments? Then get what you can afford. If you've only got $50 and you can buy something for $50, then get what you can afford. Now, at about $200 or $300, all bets are off. There's so much choice. I personally like the Audient at that price range. They're entry models because I like the way the preamps sound. But does it mean the digital to analog conversion is better or worse than others? Probably not, but I like the preamps. So it really comes down to that. How many preamps do you need? And what's your budget? If your budget's only $50, buy what you can afford and get making music. If your budget's $200 to $300, then, and you need a certain amount of inputs, then weigh it out. I like the Audient, I like the mic pre's. That isn't to say, of course, that UAD don't make great stuff. They make amazing stuff. There's a lot of choice. And if you're asking me about, if you don't have a budget constraint, then you have a lot of choice. The other thing is, what are you recording? Are you recording live bands? If you're recording live bands, you'll need a minimum of 8 inputs, because how else are you going to record a drum kit? So even if you do kick, snare, top only, 2 toms, 2 overheads, you're immediately at 7. Throw in a hi-hat, you're at 8. You've got the room mics. 8 is kind of the minimum to get going. So it's definitely worth understanding who your client base is. Is it just you? Is it a band? That's going to make a big decision for you. Personally, it's all weighed against how much you can afford. And that's probably the thing that I would be concerned about most, is making sure that you're not stopping yourself from recording because of some technical spec or somebody's opinion. That's the thing I think that bothers me most and concerns me most, is if you've got $300 to spend, but you need 8 inputs, then you're looking at the used market, and you should do it. Because if you need 8 inputs to record bands, local bands, then get what you can afford. And you might go to a forum and they might trash talk you and say that, no, you can't use that 5-year-old interface. You need to be using this other thing that's 5 times the price. I would disagree. You need to be using what you can afford and get making music. It might be that this brand new interface that's $2,500, $3,500, they are amazing. There's so many amazing ones. But you might find a used something at $500, which you can actually afford, that has 8 mic pre's, that allows you to record the band, that makes you the money to buy the $3,500 interface. Don't only stay with a 2-input interface because you don't have the budget. So don't let budget stop you from making music, and understand that the, so-called higher quality stuff is, yes, it's going to be high quality. Yes, you do want to aspire to it. Yes, you do want the best gear you can afford. But don't let it stop you from making music. Thanks ever so much. Please tell us about your experiences. You can tell sometimes I feel a little frustrated with the conversations about interfaces, because I really value high quality equipment at affordable prices. But it's really important to me that nobody is ever put off making music because of opinions about gear. And I scour forums and I see so much conversation about gear and so much horrible snobbery about it. And it scares me, because people come to me and they're paralyzed. They don't know what to buy. They send me emails saying they're not getting anything, and they're frustrated because they go to a forum and they get told that they don't know what they're talking about. Well, you know what? We've talked about this 1,000 times. And I've interviewed the greats. Danny Korchmar just the other day, Michael Beinhorn, Jack Douglas, Al Schmidt, Shelley Yakus. The list is endless of guys and girls that have made the records that we love. They are these incredibly talented people. None of them give a rat's about the gear compared with the most important thing, the artist. When you talk to Danny, Al, Jack, Shelley, the last thing they talk about is the microphone or the mic placement. The first thing they talk about is what was it like to work with John Lennon, Carole King, Paul McCartney. Those are what they talk about people bringing talent and performances. And as the old phrase goes that Ulrich Wilde always says, what's the best microphone that you have? The one that's in your hand. Just whatever gear you have, get making music. Get making music. Don't let anybody tell you that you're doing it wrong, because remember, they're experts, and all the experts I know are too busy telling people they are doing it wrong to actually make any music. And you talk to these wonderful, talented people that we get to talk to, and they're all like, I don't know. They make it all about the music. They make it all about the performances. They make it about getting great performances. The gear, however wonderful it is, and I love it all, is always secondary to the great song and the great performance. Anyway, thank you ever so much for watching. Please leave a bunch of comments and questions below. I really, really appreciate everything that you talk about. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience going through here and reading them all. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing. See you all again very soon.